Dresden, Germany, 1877. A city of Baroque stone, of European certainty. Into this world, a child was born who would spend his life constructing a reality that existed only in his own mind. As a boy, he preferred instruments to people. He built mechanical things. He drew diagrams alone in his room. The world outside his window held no interest. The world inside his mind held everything he needed. He claimed that a dead ancestor visited him in childhood visions and revealed the face of his true love. She was dark-haired, exotic, from another century. He spent the next 60 years searching for her. In the early 1920s, he married a German woman named Doris Schaefer. They had 2 daughters together. He sat at the family table every evening and was simply not present. His family learned to continue without him. In February 1926, he boarded a steamship in Rotterdam and sailed for America. He left his wife and 2 daughters behind in Germany without looking back. He was 50 years old and starting over entirely. He crossed the Atlantic Ocean convinced he was traveling towards something inevitable. The ocean did not know this. The ship did not know this. Only he knew. That is the particular quality of obsession. It requires no confirmation. He left his family behind in Zephyr Hills and moved alone to Key West in 1927. He took a position as a radiology technician at the Marine Hospital. He was 50 years old. He was starting over completely. The Marine Hospital in Key West was a modest colonial building with ceiling fans and white-painted walls. He worked the radiology department alone. He was precise, solitary, and content with machines rather than people. Key West in the late 1920s was a small, warm, working-class city. Cuban-American families lived alongside cigar factories and Catholic churches. On Friday evenings, people gathered at La Brisa to dance. A complete world. Maria Elena de Hoyos was born on July 31, 1909, in Key West, Florida. Her father was a cigar maker. She danced at La Brisa on Friday evenings. She was known as a local beauty. In 1926, Elena married a young Cuban-American man named Luis Mesa. She was 17 years old. The marriage ended after she suffered a miscarriage. Mesa moved to Miami. Elena returned to her family's home. Then Elena became ill. A persistent cough that would not stop. Weight she could not keep. Her mother, Aurora, brought her to the Marine Hospital on the morning of April 22, 1930, for examination, for answers. The radiology technician assigned to her that morning called himself Count Karl von Kossel. He was not a count. He was not a doctor. He was a technician carrying an obsession he had held for 40 years. When he saw Elena for the first time, he stopped moving completely. He said he recognized her from his childhood visions. Elena was a sick young woman at a hospital appointment. She had no idea what this moment meant to him. Elena was diagnosed with tuberculosis. In 1930, this was almost always a death sentence. The disease had already begun moving through her family. It would eventually claim nearly every one of them. He brought X-ray equipment to her home. He brought medicines and experimental treatments. He brought gifts of jewelry and clothing. He told her he loved her. She did not reciprocate. No evidence suggests she ever did. He brought electrical devices with electrodes, convinced he could charge her oxygen and reverse the disease. None of it worked. Elena continued to decline. He continued coming to her home every week, regardless. Elena died on October 25, 1931. She was 22 years old. She died at her parents' home in Key West, surrounded by her family. Her mother held her hand. Her sister, Florinda, was beside her. He paid for her funeral and commissioned an above-ground mausoleum in Key West Cemetery. The family accepted his offer. They did not know he had arranged to keep the only key to her tomb. He visited the mausoleum almost every night for 2 years. He sang to her. He believed her spirit spoke to him there. The family saw his flowers and believed their daughter was at rest. She was not where they thought. In April 1933, he entered the cemetery after dark. He opened the mausoleum with his key. He placed Elena's remains on a child's toy wagon. He pulled it through the dark cemetery. Then he took her home. He carried her through Key West before dawn. Nobody saw him. Nobody stopped him. A man pulling a child's wagon down a sleeping street. The city did not know what was passing through it in the dark. He brought her to his home and closed the door. He had a workbench prepared, spools of piano wire, glass jars of wax, bolts of white silk, glass eyes in a small wooden box. He began to work. He attached her bones together with piano wire. He replaced her decomposing skin with silk soaked in wax and plaster. He fitted glass eyes into the sockets. He made a wig from her hair, the hair her mother had given him. He filled her abdominal and chest cavity with rags to hold the original form. He dressed her in stockings, gloves, and jewelry. He applied perfume and preserving agents every week to slow what could not be stopped. He kept her in his bed. He played the organ for her every evening. He cooked meals. For 7 years, he lived entirely in a world of his own construction, with a version of Elena that only he had made. Outside his windows, Key West continued its ordinary life. Neighbors noticed the nightly music from his house. Some found it strange. Nobody looked inside. Nobody asked. He had explanations ready for everything. The Hoyos family visited the mausoleum regularly and found it always maintained. Flowers left, door locked. They had no reason to open it. For 7 years, they believed Elena was resting inside. In 1940, Elena's sister Florinda heard rumors. Someone had seen something through a window. She went directly to Tanzler's house. She walked past him into the interior room, and she saw what 7 years had hidden. Florinda went immediately to the police. Tanzler was arrested the same afternoon. He was calm during the arrest, practiced, composed. He had rehearsed this moment. He believed it could be explained away. On October 9, 1940, Tanzler appeared before the Monroe County Court in Key West. The charge? Wantonly destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization. He was found mentally competent to stand trial. The case was dismissed. Not because he was found innocent, but because the statute of limitations had expired. The law did not say what he did was acceptable. The law simply said the clock had run out. Shortly after the discovery, physicians examined Elena's remains. Her body was then put on public display at the Dean Lopez Funeral Home in Key West. Approximately 6,800 people came to view it over several days. The public response to the case was largely sympathetic to Tanzler. Many people described it as a love story. Newspapers called him an eccentric romantic. Elena's name appeared mostly in relation to him. Elena was reburied in Key West Cemetery, in an unmarked grave, in a secret location chosen by her family specifically to prevent anyone from finding her again. No headstone, no marker, no name on the ground above her. In 1944, Tanzler moved near his wife Doris in Pasco County, who supported him financially. He constructed a life-sized effigy of Elena using her death mask. He lived with the effigy until he died. Carl Tanzler died on July 3, 1952, in Pasco County, Florida. He was 75 years old. His body was not discovered for 3 weeks. He died under the name Carl Tanzler, not the count he had claimed to be. This story has been told many times, in pulp magazines, documentaries, books, and ghost tours. Almost always described as a love story. A man who loved a woman so much, he could not let her go. Elena de Hoyos did not love him. There is no evidence she ever did. She was a sick young woman who needed medical care. He was the person with access to that care. That is not love. She went to the hospital on April 22, 1930, looking for help with a disease that was killing her. She was 20 years old. What she found was a man who had already decided what she meant to him. She never agreed to any of this. She never could have agreed to any of this. She died in 1931 in her own bed, surrounded by her family. Everything that happened after was done entirely without her consent. Her name was Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos. She was born in Key West. She was Catholic. She liked dancing and cooking. She was a complete person before any of this began. She remained one throughout. Her sister Florinda was the one who stopped it. Not the hospital, not the neighbors, not the law. Florinda, who heard the rumors, went to the house, saw what was there, and went directly to the police. The case was dismissed on a technicality. The system that employed him and then dismissed his case on a technicality never fully answered for what it had failed to prevent. The law ran out of time before it ran out of excuses. 6,800 people came to view Elena's remains on public display at the funeral home. Coverage described Tanzler sympathetically. Almost nobody asked what Elena would have wanted. Nobody had asked her while she was alive either. She is buried in Key West Cemetery in an unmarked secret location chosen by her family. Her name is not on the ground. Above her, ordinary grass, ordinary soil, ordinary Key West. Nothing marks what is underneath. What the medical system failed to do here was not dramatic. It employed a man. It gave him access to vulnerable patients. It did not examine closely enough what kind of man he was. That was sufficient for disaster. A radiology technician has access to patients at their most vulnerable, sick, frightened, dependent on care. That access is given in trust. He used it differently than it was intended. The system did not notice for years. No law was broken when he treated her at home with experimental equipment. No law prevented him from keeping the mausoleum key. The law only activated when the body was removed. By then, 7 years had passed. And when the law finally activated, it ran out of time. The statute of limitations had expired. The charge was dismissed. He walked out of the courthouse a free man. Elena remained buried in an unmarked location. This story is usually told as a tragedy of love. A man destroyed by his devotion to a woman who died too young. There is another way to tell it entirely, from where Elena was standing. From where Elena stood, a sick young woman sought medical help. The man with access to that help decided she was his destiny. She did not consent to that. She never could. She did not know he had decided it. She died of tuberculosis at 22 years old. Everything that followed was done to her, not by her. Her body taken, her remains displayed, her grave made secret. She had no say in any of it. The mausoleum in Key West Cemetery is a tourist attraction today. People photograph it. They read about Count von Kossel. They find the story compelling. The actual unmarked grave, nearby, most visitors never find it. Elena de Hoyos died in 1944. Elena's mother, Aurora, died in 1940, the same year the discovery was made. Her father, Francisco, died in 1934. The family that loved Elena, gone. The story that replaced her, continuing. The question this case raises for medicine is very precise. What obligations does a healthcare system have to patients beyond the clinical encounter? What does access to the sick and vulnerable actually require of those who hold it? Tanzler was psychiatrically examined and found competent to stand trial. The system acknowledged he was not insane. It then dismissed his case on a technicality. Competent but unaccountable. The law has a word for that: free. He wrote his autobiography in 1947. He described it as a love story. He described Elena as his destined companion. He was the only one left who could tell any version of these events. He used that advantage. Elena never wrote an autobiography. She never gave an interview. She never described her own feelings about the man who came to her home with equipment and gifts she did not want. She died at 22. What we know of Elena comes from her family and the historical record. She was 20 years old when she walked into that hospital. She had a full life before that morning. She had no idea what was about to begin. She liked Rudolph Valentino films. She danced at La Brisa. She cooked for her family. She was Catholic, married, sick, and complete. A full person who became the object of another person's obsession. The story, as usually told, ends with Tanzler, his death, his effigy, his decades of devotion. This is the version he wrote himself in 1947. He chose the ending. He was the only one left who could. The version Elena would have written ends differently. On October 25, 1931, in her parents' home in Key West, with her mother's hand in hers, before anyone took anything from her that she had not already given. After Elena died, the people who loved her continued their lives. Florinda continued. Aurora lived 9 more years. They visited the mausoleum and left flowers for a woman who was not inside. They did not know this yet. When Florinda discovered the truth in 1940, she was 34 years old. She had been leaving flowers at an empty tomb for 9 years. The realization of what had happened to her sister in that time, unimaginable. The question the medical system should have asked in 1930 is not complicated. Is the behavior of this employee toward this patient appropriate? That question was never formally asked, not in time to matter. He was fired from the Marine Hospital at some point before 1940 for reasons that were never made public. Too late, too quiet, never publicly connected to what he was doing in the house on the other side of the city. The Marine Hospital continued operating after he left. The mausoleum continued being visited by the family. The city continued its ordinary life. Only the Hoyos family was carrying what had been done to their daughter. When Florinda confronted Tanzler, he did not deny what she found. He tried to explain it. He had explanations prepared for this exact moment. He had been constructing his explanation for 7 years. He believed it sufficient. Florinda Hoyos is not the famous name in this story. Carl Tanzler is. But Florinda ended it. She went to the house. She went to the police. She is the reason this stopped in 1940 and not later. This story has been told as romance, as tragedy, as horror, as dark tourism. In Key West, it appears on the ghost tour circuit. In the Hoyos family, it is simply what happened to Elena. She walked into the Marine Hospital on April 22, 1930, looking for help with a disease that was killing her. She was 20 years old. She deserved the care she came for. That should have been the whole story. Elena de Hoyos is buried in Key West in an unmarked, secret location. Her name is not on the ground above her. Ordinary grass, ordinary soil, ordinary Key West. Nothing marks what is underneath. She was born July 31st, 1909. She died October 25th, 1931, 22 years old, from Key West, Catholic. She liked to dance. She was not a story. She was a person. Those are different things. Key West is still there. The harbour, the wooden houses, the cemetery with its palms and subtropical light. The city where Elena was born, lived and died. Her city. That is the last image. Not his story. Hers.